last recapper, we're going to talk Michigan here, and we have to because this is a phenomenal football team, man. Like I'm impressed by a lot of things that they do week in and week out. And what I've gotten to is Ohio State is a very good football team that has some obvious flaws. Michigan is a very good football team that has some obvious flaws, and they're getting ready to clash in a couple of weeks. And you've got two of the great game day coaches in college football. You have coordinators that are phenomenal adjusters, really good at giving their guys coaching points. And I want to see how this chess match plays out, but let's get into the game that they played against Nebraska. Mentioned the score earlier, 34-3. And this was Michigan in their bag, typically the way that they play a game. The defense, absolutely suffocating. And these guys, watching them week in and week out, has been so impressive to me, especially with what they were a year ago and what they lost. And then you go through all of the names, Aiden Hutchinson, David Ojabo, Dax Hill, all first-round talents. And then Josh Ross on that defense. I believe he led the team in tackles last year from the linebacker spot. Not a guy who people talk about enough, in my opinion, because of the leadership that he brought to that defense. They had to replace all of that. And I mean, it looks like they haven't missed anything. And you can make the argument that this defense is significantly better than the defense that they had a year ago. And that's not a knock on those guys. It is praise to what they're doing this year. They held Nebraska to 50% completion on the day. They would not allow Nebraska to run the damn ball. And that is impressive to me as well. And then you flip it over to the offense. Blake Corum, I mean, the guy is putting together his Heisman resume right now. He ran for 162 yards on 28 attempts. He averaged almost 6 yards a carry. And he did that with just a long of 12 on the day. So it was just consistent haymakers that he was throwing to the defense. This is where you start to dig into the flaws of this Michigan team, though. And I don't want to spend entirely too much on them because they're very few and far between. But you go back to these power rushes I talked about, the runs of 2 yards or less that convert for a first down or a touchdown. They were 1 of 10. And for a team that is a mash them off the ball, downhill run team, that's a number that they certainly need to improve on. And then you look at the downfield passing game. JJ McCarthy struggled once again. He was only 40% completion on the day. And the ball was wet. Like, you give him a little bit of a pass for that, but you never know what the weather is going to be, especially late in the year in the Big Ten. And he struggled to get the ball down the field. It's something that we're all looking at right now. They had 3 big passes of 15 or more. I know at least one of them was a catch and run, though. And that's where they've come with some of their more explosives. But just in terms of air yards and connecting downfield, it's something that hasn't happened for them. As you evaluate this team and where they're going to be in a couple of weeks when they meet with Ohio State and Columbus, where are you at on these guys? Do you think that their positives, which there are so many, are enough to win them a football game? And I'm not just talking about that one. I'm talking about Michigan as a team that could win a national title this year. Is the way that they're constructed and the way that they play football, specifically offensively, enough to get them there?
Well, I think they are built very similarly to how they were last year, right? And that was enough. And I think the move to JJ McCarthy was the piece that Coach Harbaugh and the staff thought was the difference for whatever reason, however they evaluated. I think that was where they thought they could have improved and put themselves in that situation. But again, to me, it's a little bit of the same song and dance. And I think even Cade proved that he could go out and win games last year for Michigan in certain situations where JJ has not had to prove that yet. And that, to me, and it's not a knock on the kid, obviously very, very super talented. They obviously have players on the outside. Ronnie Bell, they got a great tight end room. They've got guys outside that they can get the football to and stretch the field, but they just haven't had to do it. And to me, that's the biggest question mark when you don't have to do that in nut cutting time, 3rd and 7s consistently, 3rd and 8s consistently, deliver the ball to your second and third progression, get through it, buzz through it, throw it with conviction. He doesn't have a problem throwing it with conviction, but getting to those things, because that's what these teams that you're talking about winning a national championship, these top 4 teams do to you. They take away 1, they take away 2, they try to get you to have to get to these other options. And when you haven't had to do that, and you have to do that in a setting like that where the lights are bright, it's tough. And to me, when you look at Michigan and compare them to the other 4 teams, possibly 5, 6 teams that may be in the race here at the end of it, that position and the lack of having to perform in that situation is what separates it. It's not it's not that if you roll JJ McCarthy out there and line him up side by side with all these other quarterbacks that we're talking about on these other programs, the Stetson Bennett's, the Hendon Hookers, the CJ Strouds, he could throw it with all of them better than a lot of them. Even Max Duggan at TCU, kid's been through it all. He's a warrior, right? He's shouldered the load on multiple games for that team.
He really has.
To me, that is how you win national championships. To me, that's how you make the next step. And again, they just quite haven't had to put JJ in that position. And it's hard to knock it because they've done everything they needed to do on the other side of the ball and running the football in other ways to not have to ever be in that situation. But I think it's an hourglass, right? You turn that thing over, eventually that sand's going to run out and that's going to have to come up. And that's my only hesitation with this Michigan football team. And it's something that I've been very, very consistent with and very, very confident in, is that JJ McCarthy's going to have to win them a really, really big football game solely by himself at some point in time this year. And all these other quarterbacks have done that. You've watched Stetson Bennett do it. You've watched CJ Stroud do it. You've watched Max Duggan do it. You've watched Hendon Hooker do it. You've watched all of these guys shoulder that load. JJ hasn't had to do that. And that's my biggest question mark. And to your point, I think if Ohio State comes out smoking the way that I think they can defensively, you're going to have to see that in Columbus on Thanksgiving weekend.
And that's the one scenario that I think all of us are wondering about, is like, we watched CJ Stroud on the road against Penn State, had to have a great fourth quarter. It's exactly what he did. I mean, that was a clinic in offensive football and just connecting with your guys. We watched also with Ohio State when they were playing Iowa, like that game was sticky in the third quarter. And then they really started to put 4 consecutive touchdown drives together. So I'm totally there with you. This is a Michigan team that's been really good in the second half, but they haven't had a game that went into the fourth quarter where they really had to pull away. And this is the one scenario that I could see that would be probably the worst scenario for Michigan. Is I think that their secondary has given up some plays and one-on-ones. And if Ohio State can put together a couple of those type of drives early on in the game, that's going to take them out of what they do. Because Michigan, at least in these games where the first half hasn't been explosive, it's been a close first half, but we haven't really seen them have to like come from a 2-touchdown deficit and really make those plays. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, because if Ohio State can't stop Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards and CJ Stokes and some of these other guys that they have toting the rock, and this ain't going to be the conversation. Like, that's something that has to happen. It's job number one. And Ohio State's been much better at stopping the run, but let's not pretend they face a rushing attack like what Michigan's going to roll out there. That's the only thing, is if their game plan cannot be executed the way that they have done it for all of these games, that's where you really start to ask the question. But it goes back to this idea that nobody's been able to stop them yet. So we haven't had to see that happen. It's a really unique spot. This is a team that I have a ton of respect for, and especially with the things that they were up against coming into the year. We talked about the defense, but you look offensively, like Jim Harbaugh was a guy who's sniffing around at the NFL, so you have to keep the offense together. JJ McCarthy, who's their starting quarterback right now, was banged up during the spring, and then he didn't have the job outright until, third week, fourth week of the season, or whatever the case was there. They have been masterful in the face of all of that. So I believe that this is a team that can withstand and endure. Just really, really intriguing, man, as we get to the final couple weeks here.
Yeah, it's just so hard too. Like I said, they're a true old school. Like even Georgia, they've shown a propensity to have to throw the football and win games in that manner, and they've done it. And they've done it in unique ways.
I mean, like Stetson and Ladd and all those damn tight ends. The list on those guys. They have been explosive through there.
So it's just like that's my only question mark. And again, I agree with you. I got a ton of respect for the way Michigan's built it, because that's my type of football, man. Turn around, hand that bitch off, work off play action, freaking put people in binds all day long. You're the same way. You and I are both the same way. We would be old school football guys, if there's a brand, I'd have that bitch on head to toe every time I was watching it. Like,
Yep.
that's just, I love it. It's the way the game was meant to be played. And I have a ton of respect for Michigan for going to do that. But again, in today's day and age, with all those special forces out there that are freaking just bombs away, got matchup problems all day long, you got to have a quarterback that can do that too.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not saying
and,
JJ can't, and I want to iterate that. I want to hit that point hard. I'm not saying he can't. I'm just saying he has not done it yet. And that's where we're going to find out how good this Michigan team can be.